Hi, my name is Mike Adada, and I'm the CTO of Swift Law North. Joining us here today is Aaron Swift. He's our CEO. How are you, Aaron?
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. Good.
Today, we're going to continue talking about FDCPA and the FDCPA 101 section. What is a valid dispute? So let's start here. Valid is capitalized in this lecture. Why?
Two reasons, Mike. And one is a play on words, because another thing in this industry is a validation request. So I wanted to distinguish between a validation request and a dispute letter, because that's critical here to consumers, for our lecture series watchers, our credit and industry partners. It's really important to understand the distinction between a validation request and a dispute letter. And then it's doubly important that if you are trying to dispute, that you do it in a valid way, because the statute, this law, has certain requirements. And if you don't follow those, whether you're the consumer, representing the consumer as a repair professional or a lawyer, you can really trip up and not either trigger rights that the statute should be triggered, or you end up filing a lawsuit because you think you disputed validly and it turns out you did not. So it's capitalized because we want to make that distinction, and also it's incredibly important.
Okay, and so what is a valid dispute?
It's obviously the next logical question. So I'm going to talk about what is a valid dispute, and then also distinguishing that against a validation request. So everyone might be familiar, certainly by now, if you're watching these videos, if you've been in the space, as you get a debt collection letter, it has all this language. I'm a debt collector. I'm contacting you to collect this debt. You can dispute the validity of it or any portion thereof, and it gives you time limits. It says within the next 30 days, if you respond to this collection letter, we have to do certain things. That is a validation request. It's in response to a debt collection letter. That is not a dispute, and here's why. So one, you have that right to get validation of certain information, but you can only do that for those 30-day period. And so many people in this space, so many professionals, entire businesses make this distinction inaccurate, and then they're acting upon it in a way that doesn't actually trigger the statute. To make a validation request, it has to be within that 30-day window. Otherwise, they just don't have to respond. But you can dispute anytime, and that's very important. So distinguishing between those two, then answering what is a valid dispute, it doesn't sound like a lot or complicated, but it kind of is. One, you have to give enough information to actually make it known that you do dispute. And some very aggressive lawyers and consumers have made the case in the past that I wasn't paying. That should have been obvious that I was disputing. And the court said, no, that's not a positive or some sort of manifestation of a dispute. So you have to make it clear. But you don't have to do magic language. You don't have to say even the word dispute technically. It just has to, from the viewpoint of the least sophisticated consumer, which we've talked about a lot throughout the series as the standard, have I done enough to make it clear that there's some sort of dispute? If it's, I don't know who you are, well, then that's a dispute. I don't recognize this debt. I refuse to pay it. It doesn't take magical words, but you still have to make it clear enough. And just refusing to pay, not answering their phone calls, or another case, how when you get phone calls, they try to identify you. I need to confirm who you are. In this case, the consumer wouldn't do that. No, I refuse. I don't know who you are, debt collector. I'm not going to verify myself. Hang up. Well, the debt collector didn't mark that account as disputed, so the consumer sued and lost, because they said that wasn't enough. You can't just say, I don't know who you are. It's not, I don't know what this debt is, and it's not, I'm going to refuse to even prove who I am as a consumer. That wasn't enough. So to be valid, it has to identify the consumer. So if you send a letter, of course, you need to have your name. If you can, an account number. If you're disputing a response, like to a text message, of course, you're going to be responding right away. But to be valid, it has to identify the consumer and do enough to put them on notice that there's some sort of dispute.
Okay, and so why does this matter? Why do we care so much that it's valid?
Yeah, I got into that a little bit, but taking it a step further is because there are so many things that protect a consumer after a valid dispute is sent and then received, and it also can give you a lot of strength when you're trying to get new loans. And let me explain both of those and more. So one is, we've talked about common violations earlier in this video series, and one of those is if a debt is disputed, the debt collector must, by law, mark it as disputed on credit reports and to anyone else they're communicating that debt to. And probably not shocking, it doesn't happen a lot of times. So it's important that if you're going to sue a debt collector because, hey, I disputed this debt to you, but you didn't mark it as dispute in my credit report, well, you have to prove that you actually disputed, and it has to be a valid dispute. And then lastly, I would say it matters because in credit reporting, your credit score, I'm sure everyone's familiar, your FICO score, and in fact, might sound crazy to a lot of people. You have probably 20 to 50 credit scores in any one given time about you. They're dynamic, they change every day. There's a whole bunch of different ones. There's a different credit score if you apply for a home versus you're applying for a credit card, whole host of things. But one interesting thing is if you dispute a debt and then it's correctly marked as disputed on your credit report, there are some credit scoring models that don't take that debt into account when doing your credit score. And it kind of makes sense, right? If this is a valid dispute and then I'm going to apply for something, well, don't hold that thing against me and don't make it hurt my credit score. It's a little tricky because then some people started to artificially dispute everything, which then raised credit scores too high artificially. So again, it has to be a valid dispute, and then that's a content validity. So not only does it have to properly address, who you are and stuff, but you can't just willy-nilly, make some argument and then try to hold them accountable. But if you do it the right way, it can, one, protect you, can stop the harassment, you can sue them if they don't, mark an account as disputed. But then on the credit side, a disputed account and oftentimes won't hurt you on a credit application. So those are the two reasons why. And again, it has to be valid.
Okay. And so finally, how does this tie into debt collection, credit reporting, and the world of credit repair?
Exactly. That's what we're here for, right? Try to educate consumers, our affiliate partners, our scholar partners to help consumers make the right choices, do the right things, and then ultimately hold these debt collectors accountable. So it connects this world by we encourage consumers to dispute. We encourage our partners that work directly with consumers to dispute because you have that right. Now, we also discourage validation requests after 30 days because that isn't successful. But that dispute can, like we said, help the consumer with their credit score. They can get credit sooner. If they don't mark it as disputed, it'll give a way to sue, which can be used as leverage, perhaps to erase the debt, get it removed from credit reports. But it's such an important tool, and it is one of the resources. And in our extra credit lecture, which you can buy separately, you actually get some templates of these dispute letters. So you'll know for sure that it's valid because it was drafted by lawyers who've been doing this for a long time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Aaron. And as always, if anybody has any more questions, you can talk to us in the weekly sessions or in the private chats. Thank you.
Thank you.